Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Something really jumped out from recent data.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, it seems men are now 4 times more likely to say they have no close friends compared to, like, 20 years ago.
4 times. Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark statistic, isn't it?
It really is. And it suggests, well, a potentially significant shift in how men experience connection.
Exactly. It makes you wonder about the wider impact of that kind of isolation. So that's what we're going to explore in this deep dive.
And what's fascinating, or maybe worrying, is how consistent this seems to be across different studies.
Right, it's not just a one-off finding.
No, definitely not. We're seeing this trend of rising loneliness, kind of specifically hitting modern men. And our aim today is really to understand the reasons behind it and think about why it matters.
Absolutely. And we've gathered some really interesting sources that all seem to point in a similar direction.
Like what?
Well, we'll be looking at an analysis from the YouTube channel. And they reference research from the American Survey Center, 2021,
Right, I've seen that one.
plus a study from Japan on single-person households, and findings from a national Taiwan University professor back in 2017,
So different countries, different contexts.
but showing a similar pattern. It's quite striking.
It really is. So our mission here, I guess, is to get to the heart of why so many men might be feeling increasingly alone.
Even if they have, like, colleagues or guys they do stuff with.
Exactly. Why aren't those connections maybe fulfilling that deeper need for support?
And why should we, be concerned about this as a society?
Good question.
So let's start by looking at the sheer scale of this. The American Survey Center's 2021 data.
Yeah.
It found that 15% of men reported having zero close friends. 15%.
15. Wow. Compared to what it used to be?
Well, back in 1990, that number was only 3%.
3 to 15. That's the fourfold increase you mentioned.
Exactly. Huge jump. And it's noticeably higher than for women. In 2021, it was 10% for them.
Okay, so a gap there too.
Yeah. And it suggests this isn't just, a few isolated guys.
Mm.
It points to a bigger shift in male social connection.
Which could impact lots of things, right? Mental health, community.
For sure. And it goes beyond just not having friends.
How so?
That same American research showed a big drop in help seeking among young men.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
In 1990, about 40% of teenage boys said they'd turn to friends first if they had a problem.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
By 2021, that dropped to just 22%.
Wow, nearly halved.
Yeah, so it's just maybe less reliance on peers during those really formative years.
And you have to wonder if that sets a pattern for later life, maybe leading to even more isolation down the line.
Could be a snowball effect, yeah.
Mm?
And it's not just an American thing either.
Right. You mentioned the Japanese study.
Yes, it looked at socially isolated single-person households. An astonishing 75% of the people in that situation were men.
75%. Goodness. That really emphasizes how widespread this can be, culturally speaking.
Totally. And then there's the Taiwanese data reinforcing it too.
From the NTU professor.
Yeah, the 2017 study, it showed the percentage of men who hadn't confided in a friend in the past year went from 3% in 1997 up to 19%.
That's a big leap.
Huge. And maybe even more telling, men reported a 43% drop in the number of close male friends they had over that time.
43%. And how did that compare to women?
Women saw a decrease too, but smaller, 31%.
So again, a more pronounced trend among men.
Seems so. Okay, so we've established the scale. It's significant. It's cross-cultural. Now, let's try and dig into the why. What could be driving this increase?
Well, the sources really point strongly towards traditional gender roles playing a big part.
The classic expectations.
Exactly. The deeply ingrained societal pressure for men to be, strong, independent, self-reliant.
Don't show weakness. Don't rely on others.
That whole men don't cry easily stereotype, it still seems to hold a lot of sway.
And it feels like there's this sort of unspoken code that discourages men from reaching out.
Right, definitely. And the video transcript we looked at brings up a really crucial point about what happens when they do try.
Oh.
Well, their experiences can often be negative. Instead of getting support, they might face ridicule or be dismissed, maybe even criticized.
Ouch. Yeah, that would make anyone hesitant to try again.
Exactly. If being vulnerable gets you shot down, you're naturally going to be less likely to seek help or emotional connection next time.
Which might explain, as the video suggests, why some men lean towards more solitary ways to deal with stress.
Could be. Things like individual sports or maybe getting lost in video games, activities instead of talking it out.
Right. Less risk of that negative feedback loop.
Potentially. And it almost feels like society itself isn't really set up to encourage deep male friendships in the same way.
What do you mean?
Well, the traditional focus is often on men as, sons who become independent providers, responsible husbands.
Kind of individual roles.
Yeah, perhaps overlooking how vital close friendships are for their overall well-being, not just for practical support.
That's a really interesting point. Which leads us to another key idea. How friendship itself might be defined differently.
Ah, yes, the shoulder-to-shoulder versus face-to-face idea.
From Paul Wright back in '82.
That's the one. It's a really helpful way to think about potential gender differences in friendship styles.
So remind us, shoulder to shoulder.
That's often seen as more typical for men. Friendships built around doing things together, shared activities, group memberships.
Like playing on a team, working on a car, being in a gaming guild.
Exactly. It's about the camaraderie that comes from those shared experiences side by side.
Okay. And face to face.
More often prioritized in women's friendships, traditionally speaking, it emphasizes emotional sharing, mutual support, talking things through.
More about intimacy and vulnerability.
Precisely. And the video illustrates this well. Men might call colleagues they eat lunch with friends or teammates.
Or guys they game with online.
Right. Whereas women might reserve the term friend more for people they share deeper personal stuff with, feelings, getting real support.
And this difference is really key, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
having guys you do stuff with, that doesn't automatically mean your emotional needs are met.
Not at all. A man could have a wide circle of acquaintances but still feel deeply lonely if those connections lack that emotional depth.
Right. It's not just about the number of contacts.
No, it's about the quality of the relationships. Do they fulfill those core emotional needs? You can be surrounded by people and feel totally isolated.
Makes sense. Now, the video also brings up how modern life, societal changes might be making things worse.
Yeah, amplifying these existing issues.
It's not the same world as even 20, 30 years ago.
Definitely not. Take online interaction, for instance.
Right, the internet. Good or bad?
Well, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? It offers ways to connect.
Sure.
But seeing everyone's highlight reels on social media can also fuel that social comparison trap.
Feeling like your life doesn't measure up?
Exactly. Which can potentially lead some people to withdraw rather than engage.
And what about marital status? That seemed important in the research.
Very much so. The data suggests unmarried or divorced men report significantly more loneliness than married men.
Okay. And for women?
That difference based on marital status seems less pronounced for women.
Why might that be?
Well, the video suggests that for single men, maybe those activity-based friendships just don't provide enough deep emotional support.
Whereas a partner often does.
Right. For many men in relationships, their partner becomes that primary, sometimes only, source of deep emotional support and companionship.
Okay, so if you combine that idea
Yeah.
with modern trends like people marrying later or not at all, plus economic stress, maybe limiting social time, it seems like those traditional challenges men face in forming deep connections could be getting, amplified today.
That seems to be the argument, yes. All these factors potentially converging.
Which really underlines why the World Health Organization called loneliness a pressing global health concern in 2023.
Exactly. This isn't just about feeling sad or left out. It has serious health implications.
We saw that link during the pandemic, didn't we? Isolation linked to rises in suicide and depression.
Absolutely. But the impact goes way beyond that acute phase.
What else are we talking about?
Well, research shows chronic loneliness can actually lead to, structural changes in the brain.
Really?
Yeah, and significantly increases the risk of developing dementia later on.
Wow. Okay.
And the physical health risks are pretty alarming, too. Loneliness is consistently linked to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease.
Heart problems.
Yeah, and one study even suggested potentially a 50% higher risk of stroke for chronically lonely individuals.
50%. That's huge.
It is, and it even affects your immune system.
How?
The video mentioned it can lower immunity, make you more susceptible to getting sick,
Okay.
and it can increase inflammation in the body, which is tied to all sorts of chronic health issues.
So it really hits you physically.
It does. The WHO's Social Connection Commission put it very starkly.
What do they say?
They said the health risks of loneliness are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Whoa, seriously.
Seriously, and higher than the risks from obesity or lack of exercise.
That really puts it in perspective.
Mm,
Smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
yeah. It drives home how profound the impact is.
And it's not just the individual's health, right? The video touched on broader societal impacts, too.
Yes, like a potential link between male loneliness and maybe increased anxiety, especially around finding a partner.
How does that work?
Well, the idea is if men aren't getting their emotional needs met through friendships,
Yeah.
they might place this maybe unrealistic burden on a romantic partner to fulfill all those needs.
Putting a lot of pressure on the relationship.
Exactly. That kind of emotional over-reliance can create real strain.
I can see that. And it mentioned parenting, too,
Yeah, that fathers experiencing loneliness might have sort of poorer quality interactions with their kids.
which could affect the child's development down the road.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
So it really is this multifaceted issue with ripples going on to families and society.
Okay, so it's a big problem, serious consequences. The crucial question then is what can actually be done?
Right. What are the practical steps? The video offers some good starting points.
Where do we begin?
It starts with a shift in mindset, really. Challenging that old traditional idea that men have to suppress emotions and be totally independent.
Recognizing that everyone needs connection.
Exactly. Everyone, regardless of gender, has those fundamental emotional needs. It's just human.
So step one is kind of internal, reevaluating vulnerability.
Absolutely key. Practicing some self-compassion, realizing that expressing feelings or asking for support isn't weak or unmanly.
It's actually strong in a way.
It's human, and it's the path to stronger connections.
Okay, then what?
Well, the video encourages making a conscious effort to deepen those existing shoulder-to-shoulder friendships.
So the guys you already do stuff with.
Yeah, try moving beyond just talking about the game or the project. Intentionally try sharing something more personal, asking deeper questions.
Talking about feelings, maybe?
Could be. Discussing things beyond just the shared activity.
That might feel awkward at first, though.
Oh, for sure. It's important to acknowledge that. It might feel weird for the person sharing and the person listening.
Especially if it's not the usual dynamic.
Right. There might be a need to sort of practice expressing and listening to emotions in ways that haven't been common before.
And the video also mentioned respecting boundaries, which seems crucial.
Very important. If you try to open up and the other person isn't receptive, you have to respect that.
Don't push it.
Exactly. Pushing too hard could backfire and create more distance. It's about finding willing participants in that deeper connection.
Okay. So wrapping this up, a key takeaway seems to be that this rise in male loneliness is a really significant trend.
Definitely. With roots in those traditional expectations and maybe different approaches to friendship.
Compounded by modern life pressures.
Yeah, all these things interacting.
And that leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty provocative thought, I think.
Which is?
Do our traditional definitions of male friendship, often based on doing stuff together, really cut it? Do they meet that fundamental human need for deep emotional connection?
That's the core question, isn't it?
And maybe thinking about what small steps, even if they feel a bit uncomfortable, you or the men in your life could take.
Steps towards fostering deeper, more meaningful relationships.
Yeah, relationships that genuinely combat that feeling of isolation.
And that brings up a final point for you to consider, maybe. In this effort to connect more deeply, what specific kinds of face-to-face interactions, that real emotional sharing, might actually be the most valuable for all of us in feeling less alone?